Welcome to the inaugural episode of Sustainability and Stewardship Matters podcast, hosted by BASF Dispersions and Resins Product Stewardship Team. My name is Hannah Bleecker, Product Steward for Dispersions and podcast co-host.
And I'm Lindsey Foster, Product Steward for Resins and also podcast host. In our Sustainability and Stewardship Matters podcast, we will discuss sustainability and product stewardship topics important in the chemical realm, highlighting where these areas intersect. Those familiar with sustainability know that there are three pillars: economic viability, environmental protection, and social equity. Our podcast focuses on the environmental pillar and how BASF can help customers achieve their long-term sustainability objectives. So Hannah, would you share with the audience what today's podcast episode is about?
Sure, Lindsey. So BASF considers climate protection to be of the utmost importance and has set a goal for net zero emissions by 2050. So in today's episode, our topic highlights how we are increasing transparency for customers with product carbon footprint data and BASF's Scott tool. This is in an effort to increase understanding of greenhouse gas emissions of products. And joining us today, we have our Global Sustainability Manager for Dispersions and Resins, Alex Schenzel. Welcome, Alex. Could you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. Hi, Anna. Hi, Lindsey. First of all, thanks for having me. My name is Alex Schenzel. I am located at our headquarters in Ludwigshafen, Germany. And together with a colleague, I'm coordinating the sustainability activities of our Dispersions and Resins business unit here at BASF. So the topics which we work on include topics around climate change, like the CO2 emissions from our own production processes, but also the CO2 emissions related to our products, the so-called product carbon footprints. In addition to that, we also take care of circular economy topics, for example, making use of renewable or recycled raw materials.
Oh, that's great, Alex. Well, we're very excited to have you with us to kick off our first podcast episode.
Yes, thanks, Alex. So I'd really like to start at the beginning and get a better understanding of what is a product carbon footprint and how is that calculated?
Sure. Product carbon footprint basically summarizes the greenhouse gas emissions that are associated with the production of a product in kilograms of CO2 equivalents per kilogram of product. CO2 equivalents meaning that all greenhouse gases that are not CO2 are basically recalculated to CO2 equivalents based on their global warming potential compared to CO2. In the end, the product carbon footprint comprises out of so-called scope 1, 2, and 3. Scope 1 is about the emissions you have on site during your production processes. Scope 2 is about the emissions that are coming from the energy you purchase externally. And scope 3 upstream is about the emissions coming from the production of your raw materials at your suppliers. In the end, this is basically added up to the product carbon footprint cradle to gate, so taking into account all emissions until the product leaves, in our case, the BASF gate.
Okay, so a PCF sums up the greenhouse gas emissions from raw material extraction to the point in time it leaves the manufacturing facility, but it doesn't take into account the transportation to customers, emissions from using the product or disposal. Do I have that right?
Exactly. That's the difference between cradle to gate and cradle to grave. Cradle to grave does take into account all the topics you mentioned, so it takes into account the transportation from our product to our customers, it takes into account the use phase, and then very importantly, it also takes into account the so-called end-of-life scenario. So for example, if the plastic in the end is incinerated, which actually has a quite significant impact on the product carbon footprint because all the carbon that is originally stored in the product and so far not part of the product carbon footprint becomes part of the PCF because the carbon in the product is basically released as CO2 into the atmosphere.
Okay, interesting. Thank you for sharing. Can you speak on how the product carbon footprint information is important to our formulators?
Yeah, sure, of course. First of all, it will become more and more mandatory to report those values. So, for example, in Europe, there will be a digital product passport, which will go along with product, first of all for batteries, but in the coming years also for other products. And in this this digital product passport, the product carbon footprint is a mandatory value to give. In addition to that, you can also make the product carbon footprints part of your buying decisions. So alongside costs and supply reliability, quality, also PCFs will most probably become a buying criteria, because you will need to watch out on the emissions of your products.
Interesting to hear. So as this becomes mandatory in the coming years and is incorporated into buying decisions, and as we as BASF strive to net zero by 2050, how is it that we're taking action to improve the product carbon footprint of our products for our customers?
Yeah, great question, actually. So first of all, let's talk about scope 1 and 2. So about the actions we take to reduce our emissions as BASF. So first and foremost, you can think about so-called gray to green. So switching to as much green electricity as possible. Then second lever is making use of the off-heat of your processes. So for example, implementing heat pumps. This is also a quite significant reduction lever. These are both more, let's say, short and midterm solutions. If we think more long-term, then we really need to convert how we run our processes. Just to give you an example, at the moment we are working on a pilot facility for an electrically heated cracker. And this electrically heated cracker, once it's scaled up to global scale, can save up to 90% of the emissions compared to a cracker that we today run on natural gas. Then, in addition to that, last pillar I would see is that not all CO2 emissions can be avoided. You have some processes, some chemical reactions that just intrinsically form CO2 based on the chemistry. And for that part, you can think about, and we actually also do that, you can think about carbon capture. So that you basically capture the CO2 that comes out of the process. And we are, for example, we want to build up a facility in Antwerp at our second Verbund site here in Europe.
So the carbon capture and e-cracker are important for our scope 1 and 2 activities, but what about our scope 3 activities?
Yeah, good point. And actually scope 3 upstream, so the emissions coming from the raw materials, it's more important because that's the big share of the product carbon footprint. So roughly 70-75% of the product carbon footprint comes from scope 3 upstream. So that's a bigger, let's say, lever to tackle. And first and foremost, we have a supplier CO2 management program in place where we talk to our suppliers to get the values, so to first off get the product carbon footprints of our raw materials. And then in a second stage, we engage with them. Okay, dear supplier, what's your plan on reducing the product carbon footprint? This is very important. Second part is, which you can influence more directly, is when we make use of circular feedstocks. So recycled feedstocks or bio-based feedstocks. We can do that, for example, via the mass balance approach. It's called biomass balance if we make use of renewable feedstocks. It's called chem cycling if we make use of recycled feedstocks. And via this approach, we can quite significantly reduce the product carbon footprint for some of our products, even down by 100%.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. It's nice to hear, though, that we, BASF, are using a multi-pronged approach to achieve our net zero goals, considering all three of those scopes. Bringing it back to the product carbon footprint, though, I did want to ask, is there a global standard on how to calculate these PCFs that we use?
Yeah, there is one, the ISO 1467. That's the global norm for product carbon footprint calculation. However, that norm is very, very general because it can be used for any kind of PCF calculation. So it's not very, let's say, specific. So there are some areas where you can interpret the norm in one way or the other, which leads to the fact that you might not be able to compare PCFs from different suppliers, even though they are both ISO compliant. In order to, let's say, get rid of that problem, there was a global initiative founded, which is called Together for Sustainability, whereby now about 50 of the biggest chemical companies of the world have joined. And in one of those work streams of the TFS initiative, a methodology for the PCF calculation was derived, and this basically clarifies the remaining uncertainties so that in your end you have a standard which you can use so that all PCFs are calculated in the same way.
So to make sure I understand this, we don't currently have a methodology to compare product carbon footprints from different suppliers. However, this Together for Sustainability consortium is aiming to do just that, develop a methodology to incorporate this type of comparison. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. So all TFS members have pledged that their calculations are in accordance to the TFS methodology by 1st of September this year. So I would recommend that you go to the TFS website and have a look if your suppliers are part of the initiative or not. And yeah, by 1st of September, the values coming from the members will be comparable. And TFS also highly advocates that in the end, everybody within the chemical industry uses this methodology so that it becomes really the industry standard, and that in the end you can compare all values coming from different suppliers.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, it's really great to hear that we're working together as an industry to reach these goals and share with each other. Could you explain a little bit more about how BASF calculates our product carbon footprints?
Sure, love to. So at BASF, we have developed an own tool, which is called SCOT. SCOT stands for Strategic CO2 Transparency Tool. And it basically enables us to calculate the product carbon footprints of our products by taking into account the scope 3 emissions. So by either using supplier-specific PCFs or by relying on database values from credible databases such as Gabi, in case we don't have a supplier-specific value yet. And basically to that, it adds the emissions coming from the processes we run internally, so scope 1, and it adds the emission for the amount of energy that we have purchased externally, and in the end breaks that down to 1 kilogram of product produced at one site in one production asset. In the end, that product carbon footprint or that methodology is TÜV certified, that we calculate in a correct way, that the calculation meets the ISO standard, and that very soon it also complies with the TFS methodology.
Yeah, it's great that we have a tool such as the SCOT tool to calculate our product carbon footprints. Is this something that our customers are also able to use to calculate the product carbon footprint of their own materials?
Yeah, in principle, yes. So we as BASF have decided to make this tool, this software solution, available for everybody. So we have licensed the tool out to 4 IT companies, and these IT companies are now basically able to set up a SCOT-like tool at any company that is interested. We're of course happy to help to get you into contact with one or all 4 of those IT companies so that you can engage with them and talk about, let's say, customizing the solution to your needs. In the end, what is crucial to know is that there will be no BASF data in. So this will be just a blank IT tool, which you can then fill with your data.
So no data in the tool, but the tool itself is available, which I think will be very useful as well to reach that ability to compare product carbon footprints. Now, I know today BASF shares PCF values in a very standardized way, right? Through a PDF statement that gives not only the product carbon footprint values, but also explains our methodology and limitations of using the information. What do you think the future looks like for sharing PCF data?
Yeah, very good point, and I think also a very crucial step in the next year or two that we automate this data sharing, because as said, today we are sharing PDFs. And this is a very, let's call it standard way to share data. But where we need to end up is that we can share that data more or less automatically. And for that, the Together for Sustainability initiative is developing a data sharing platform together with Siemens. The platform will be called Green, and this has also just been published in the news 2-3 weeks ago. And I think, this will be crucial so that we get away from sharing PDF and manually adding data into Excel sheets, but that we, as BASF, for example, plug in our PCFs into the data sharing platform, and that any of our customers can directly get the actual data from the platform and plug it into their system.
Interesting to hear about the next steps in our digitalization efforts and data sharing and transparency. Since a product carbon footprint really only takes into account the greenhouse gas emissions, can you also do or provide a more comprehensive environmental analysis?
Yeah, of course, that's possible. So, as you said, the product carbon footprint is just a small share. If you look at the environmental impact of a product, the next step for me would be to run an LCA, so a life cycle assessment for a product, which not only takes into account the greenhouse gas emissions, but a lot of other things, for example, the water usage, the acidification, the eutrophication, the ozone depletion. So more factors, more environmental factors that go along with the production of a product. This, however, today is not automated in the same degree as our PCF calculation. These LCAs, for example, still need to be calculated manually by one of our experts.
So it's an option, but it just takes a little bit more time and resources. Well, that's really good to hear. And I think it's really interesting to see and share how BASF is acting on our climate protection goals and really working to offer transparent carbon data for our products that we sell to our customers.
Agreed. I've really loved to hear about the collaboration among industry leaders that's bringing us to a more sustainable future, and really looking forward to seeing what's next for sustainability.
And with that, we will close out our first episode. A very special thanks to Alex for sharing all of this information on product carbon footprints. We have links to both our BASF website on product carbon footprints and the Together for Sustainability website for those of you interested in more information. If you have any specific questions regarding our North American dispersions and resins products, please email us at napssdispersionsresins@basf.com. All of those links can be found in our YouTube episode.
Thanks. We appreciate you listening to our podcast, Sustainability and Stewardship Matters. Be on the lookout for our next episode, where Lindsey and I discuss biomass balance and how biomass balance products contribute to our sustainability journey and targets.